All right, what's going on, guys? And today we're going to be doing the oil change on our 2023 Yamaha Superjet. So we'll be doing everything by the book, except we'll be using a vacuum pump instead of an oil extractor. All right, before we get started, I want to make sure that the engine is level, and the engine's kind of at the same angle as the bond line. So when we're doing it on the trailer, we have up here, we have a jack. So since our jack for the trailer is kind of too high, we put a floor jack on the tongue of the trailer to get it to the proper level, and then we use a just small bubble level to verify that the engine is fairly level. While we're in here, I wanted to show the oil fill cap, which the manual calls that only half the oil that we put back in the engine is going in here, and then the other half of the oil that we put back in is going into the oil dipstick. So this is where you check your oil, and we'll be putting half the oil back in there, and then we'll be using this tube that's used to basically slide your extraction hose into, and that's the only purpose for this hose right here. It actually doesn't even connect to anything, it just is mounted right here. So we'll disconnect this clamp and then run our extraction hose into this tube for removing the oil. And then right below that is our oil filter, and the manual actually calls to punch a hole in it to relieve pressure before we go ahead and remove that. But before we get to that, we'll get the engine warmed up. So we're going to be going back with the Yamaha or Yamalube oil and OEM filter. Here's the part number for those who are interested, and I'll also have a link in the description for the filter and some oil, as well as a oil extractor. But some of the other tools that we'll be using are an awl. You can also use a screwdriver to punch a hole in the oil filter, and that just relieves pressure that allows the oil filter to drain properly before you unscrew it so you don't make a mess. And then this is the supplied water line for the Superjet. So we'll be using this very first thing to warm up the engine before we extract the oil. All right, so going over starting the engine with the water line hooked up, you want to always first have the engine running before you turn on the water at the faucet, and always shut off the water at the faucet before you shut the engine off. That way you don't risk damaging the engine. So first we're going to be removing the cap for the water line. And then we got the quick connect attached to the garden hose. All right, so we got the engine warmed up. We got it re-leveled on the trailer. See there? We're good to go. Now we can start the extraction process. So the directions call for removing the oil filler cap and the extraction tube. And then for our case, we're going to be using two different extraction tubes. We got the bigger hose to quickly extract as much as we can out. And we notice with this hose, it actually doesn't stick down all the way to the very bottom of the engine. It gets close. So we're going to be swapping to a smaller tube that has a smaller inner diameter, but it fits in the extraction tube easier, so it slides all the way to the very bottom. And this hose we measured out to be 20 inches. So that's including this hose here, so it might differentiate between skis. But for us, from the bottom of the tube to right here was 20 inches. So that's how far it went into the engine. So we're first going to start with the big tube, and you can see it slides in pretty easy to a certain point, and then notice that it's not wanting to go any further until I twisted it a certain direction. Then see, it goes all the way down to right there, close to our mark. and that's as far as this tube will go. And then we'll hook it up to our vacuum pump. And you can see here we actually have a little sight glass so we can actually watch the oil being sucked out of the engine. This isn't necessary, but it's just kind of cool. All right, so for our setup, we'll be using a tank and a vacuum pump. We have the hoses from the vacuum pump to the top of the tank, sucking on the vapor, creating a suction, and the oil will be sucked out of the engine and go into the tank here so we can collect it and calculate how much oil that we've actually drained out of the Superjet. Okay.
Or it will be.
I was gonna say that's pretty quick. Now we're gonna switch over to the smaller tube to see if we can get any more out. All right, we got the other hose on there. Let's see if we can get any more out. Yeah, this hose goes a lot slower because the diameter's smaller. All right, while that's finishing up, we're going to punch a hole in the filter to let the filter drain fully. There we go.
Yep, you gurgling.
Yep. So we went ahead and punched a hole in the filter using a awl, but you can use a screwdriver. The thing you just don't want to do is drill a hole into the filter because you could risk getting shavings into the engine. All right, then as per instructions, it says put a towel or a couple rags around the filter to not make as big of a mess. And then it notes to rotate the filter 360 degrees or one turn, and then wait 3 minutes before fully removing the filter. All right, so the 3 minutes is up. We're gonna go ahead and take the oil filter off, see if we can do it without making a mess. I think we're gonna be okay. Okay. Question is, am I gonna get this socket off? Oh no. All right, so we got the new filter here, and usually we always put a little bit of oil, some fresh oil that we're gonna be putting in the ski, get a little bit on the finger and put it on the filter here to lube up the O-ring, but these actually come pre-greased, so they're good to go. We're installing this and then torquing it to 13 foot-pounds. All right, we got all the oil out of the first extraction point. Now we're gonna drop down to where the oil dipstick is, and we'll be extracting oil out of there. So we already got it hooked up. We're gonna go ahead and get the oil flowing. All right, we got all the oil extracted out of the engine, and we went ahead and dumped all the oil out of that tank to measure it out, and it ended up being exactly what the manual called for. So we took out 3.6 quarts, and we're gonna be putting that back in. So go ahead and put half of the 3.6 quarts in the top filler cap, and then the other half in the oil dipstick location. All right, so we got the engine warmed up. We made sure that the engine is re-leveled, and now we're going to be checking the oil. And then this one's a little bit different than normal. You actually have to screw in the dipstick all the way. So as you can see, it's right there. So we're a little bit low, but that's okay because we actually put a little bit less than what the engine called for, just in case. So we didn't have to extract any out. So we're just gonna add a touch and we'll be good to go. All right, so since I have the full service manual for the Superjet, I thought I'd go ahead and slowly scan the oil change pages. So if you guys are interested, you can pause it and read for yourselves. All right, well, this is how we do our oil change in our 2023 Yamaha Superjet. Appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.